Hello everyone and welcome to the 17th episode of the Heavensward Dungeon Lore series. In this series, I hope to explain the things you might not know about Final Fantasy XIV dungeons, as well as discuss their individual stories and lore. This episode's dungeon is Baelsar's Wall. As the Garlean Empire began taking over some territories several years before the 7th Umbral Calamity, their power and influence grew exponentially. They would use their unmatched military might and technology in Magitech to overwhelm their foes and annex many free regions. Meanwhile, in the state of Alamigo, a civil war raged on as citizens fought to oust and overthrow the Mad King Theodoric, to which end they were eventually successful. Their triumph would not last, however, as a still expanding Garlemald took the opportunity of Alamigo's instability in its regime to invade the region en masse, with Gaius van Baelsar at the helm. They stormed through the area and overtook it completely, with Alamigo becoming a new territory for the Empire. The Alamigans scattered, either being held under the new rule of their invaders, or otherwise fleeing west towards the safe lands of the Black Shroud. Soon afterwards, to avoid immediate conflict with the then recently formed First Eorzean Alliance, Van Baelsar commissioned the construction of a colossal wall to create a barrier between the Shroud and Giribania, in order to keep out his enemies. Though these events happened around 20 years prior, the wall still stands as a monolith and reminder of those truly in control of the mountainous city-state. Not all Alamigans would sit happily amongst their new rulers, however, as many chose to fight against the occupation of their land. The Alamigan resistance, formed to fight against the Mad King, stood again to fight against the Garlean invasion. The group contained many notable members, including Curtis Hext, father of Ida, who sadly perished in the ensuing battle. The resistance too laid low for a time, until the group known as the Masks began loudly preaching to their fellows of power and reclaiming their homeland. Led by the Griffin, a mysterious masked man, they wished to free Alamigo by any means necessary. To that end, we spy a scene of one of the Griffin's decoys reporting in to the true Griffin, who soon turns to face Elidibus, the Ascian. He comments on the Warriors of Darkness, noting that the world turned void, be it dark or light, is useless for his master. He then informs the Griffin that the pawns fetched a gift from the abyss before vanishing, bringing forth the frozen eyes of Nidhogg, cast from the Steps of Faith by the Warrior of Light. Elidibus states that among the candidates considered for this gift, the Griffin was the man most suited, being a person of deep rage and despair, who seeks nothing more than vengeance. Back with the Warrior of Light, we find ourselves having our Dresch measurements being taken rather forcefully by Tataru, after which Ida bursts into our room and calls us to a meeting held by Alphino. He begins by suggesting to elect a new antecedent after Minfilia's disappearance, and although many are eager to elect another scion, the group agrees to work together without a spoken leader, as to not limit the individual's abilities. Just then, Tataru screams from outside of the Solar, and we find her standing beside an injured Makote who Ida recognises as Monago. After having her wounds healed somewhat, Monago explains she fights for the Alamigan resistance, and came the shortest way to deliver an important message, getting caught by Imperials in the process. She explains that the Griffin, the man leading part of the resistance, plans to assault Baelsar's Wall from the Alamigan side, hoping to occupy the wall and spread the war over into the Shroud and Greater Eorzea. Although Papalimo notes that his forces could not hold the wall for long against Imperial retaliation, Kryl says that the conflict could still escalate into Gridania and beyond. The Scions move into action, splitting into groups to quickly inform the heads of state, leaving the Warrior of Light to inform Emmerich and Ishgard. Meeting with the Lord Commander, he informs us that while he of course will send an envoy to the Alliance meeting, he must discuss with the House of Commons to decide who shall be sent. Soon afterwards, we head to the Gates of Judgment with Lucia to find none other than Emmerich awaiting us. He informs us that the House has decided to send him, as any military sanctions must go through him at the highest level anyway. As we begin to make our way to Gridania, we stop in at Camp Dragonhead to visit Amanalaine and Onowar who have been put in command of the checkpoint. Lucia fills them in on the situation and they agree to increase the guard detail in Emmerich's absence. As we move to continue on, Amanalaine stops us for a moment and comments on our surprised look at his being in charge after past events. He admits, as he looks to the portrait of Haurchefant upon the wall behind the desk, that his skills of command might never live up to his lost brother, but he must handle the cards dealt to him, as must we all. Afterwards we travel to Gridania and rendezvous with Emmerich, following him to the Stillglade Fane to meet with the other leaders. As we approach the meeting area, Moab arrives behind us and joins the pair as we attend the Alliance collaboration. The The meeting begins with Kani Senna reminding the envoys of the information gained from the Scions with Manage's message, confirming with Alphino the validity of the warning. Raban shares Papalimo's earlier opinion, citing that the wall would not be held against Imperial forces for long. Kane Senna too admits that alone, Gridania would not hold well against the might of Imperial forces for long either. Both Emmerich and Yugiri put forth plans to place a detachment of troops for a defensive line within Gridania, offering forth both Ishgardian and Doman forces. Raban agrees, and moves to make ready for war. After leaving the Fane, the Warrior of Light finds themselves in conversation with the twins. Alisaie consoles her brother, believing the Alliance made the right call, but Alphino appears worried. Although he too agrees with the actions decided upon by the Alliance, he feels as though some piece is missing, that the defensive force may be putting the Griffin's plan further into action by bringing Alliance troops closer to the border with Girabania. Outside of the Stillglade, Emmerich appears before us, happy to see Alisaie in good health, and wishes to thank the Warrior of Light for their assistance before returning to other duties. Yugiri too appears once more from the shadows, and Emmerich thanks her sincerely for proffering her own forces to make the feeling of accepting previously unwanted help, i.e. the Ishgardian forces, much easier for the Seedseer to decide. Alisaie grumbles about politicians making a huge speech over what could be a simple apology, but reminds the pair that their business is finished. After Yugiri states she will head off to check East Shroud and keep up with Ida and Papalimo, the twins and the Warrior of Light return to the Rising Stones to reconvene with the rest of the Scions. We head into the meeting point, where Alphino arrives a few moments later with Ida and Papalimo. Ida asks of Nago's condition, to which Kryol assures her that with rest she will be fine. Alisaie moves to inform the rest of the Alliance's plans with military support to Gridania, and Ida seems eager for conflict to break out against Garlemald. Papalimo and Alphino both scold her somewhat, with the latter wishing there was a way to reach the Griffin without open hostility. Papalimo suggests using the hidden tunnels dug around and under the wall to reach the resistance, and volunteers himself to make way to the Griffin. Ida too asserts her decision to join him, followed shortly after by both Yugiri and Thancred. Y'shtola and Kryol both decide to focus efforts elsewhere, and Alphino requests the Warrior of Light's attendants to East Shroud to keep an eye on the border. Alisaie, meanwhile, is requested to remain at the Rising Stones, as a point of contact for those on their separate ventures. Alphino makes his way to the Hawthorn Hut and informs us of a watchtower to the south, looking over the base of the wall. On the way, we run into the infiltration team, where Ida seems as excitable as ever, with Papalimo building a trademark headache as they head off to begin their mission. We in turn head to Amarisai's spire, greeting the Serpent Scout there who sends us up to speak with the commanders of each contingent of troops. Alphino is heartened to see the troops stationed there, glad to see such capable soldiers at the helm. However, after Vorsai informs us that all is quiet, a sudden explosion turns the head of everyone on the spire. Facing the wall, we see a large plume of smoke and the colour of flame burst from behind the wall. A report comes into Vorsai, surprised to hear of a full-scale attack on the wall, and even more so to hear that the attackers are wearing Grand Company colours. Alphino has a sudden realisation that the Griffin was never intending to take the wall on his own, but instead to give the strong impression that the Alliance had planned to attack the Imperial-controlled lands. He deduces that in the chaos, the Griffin could sneak himself into Alamigo and begin to incite unrest within the people, causing them to rise up and plunge the land into a potential civil war, while trying to throw out their invaders. He turns to the Warrior of Light, stating they must approach the wall at once. Although Pippin protests, Alphino believes a smaller mission will have greater chance of success, and will incite less retaliation. Over upon the wall, we see the false Grand Company troops charging about the interior, with the Griffin himself walking among his comrades, shouting triumphant words to them. Just outside the watchtower, Alphino awaits us with the Serpent Scout. He suggests a two-pronged assault, with him taking to the tunnels to intercept their allies before a battle breaks out, while the Warrior of Light scales the wall in its entirety. He suggests we find our finest forces, as we prepare to put a wedge in the plans of the mysterious masked man, by any means necessary. We arrive at the base of the path leading to the wall, and begin following the track along to the structure proper. Along the way, we run into the frantic Garlean troops, still vehemently defending the place amongst the ensuing chaos. After the first two sets of troops, we cross over a small bridge and defeat a third group, one of whom drops a security key when defeated, allowing us to bypass the nearby security terminal. Passing through the gate, we find ourselves standing upon the foundations of the wall, and more troops appear to ambush us. Defeating them and the sky armors they command, we find another security key which we use to open the large gate towards the rear of the area, leading us to Via Praetoria, where we find a dangerous Magitech predator awaiting us. This walking machine assaults the party with its various weapons, using Magitech Claw to slice at the tanking party member. Occasionally, the predator summons forth reinforcements in the forms of sky armors, which attach onto a party member and deal heavy damage if not defeated. Additionally, the predator launches dangerous missiles at party members at random, dealing damage equal to half their maximum vitality. The healer within the group must ensure the party stays above half of their maximum in order to survive. When injured, the predator launches more reinforcements and missiles, usually resulting in a party member being targeted by both. After evading its Magitech ray and taking more heat from the missiles, the predator breaks and is destroyed. Afterwards, a nearby gate opens, and we head through to the outer reaches, finding ourselves upon a maneuverable freight elevator. Interacting with the control panel, the lift begins transporting us all around the structure, occasionally stopping to unload a handful of Magitech machines upon the party. Twice, the device also stops and more machines drop in from above. As the lift subjects the party to its movements, more and more constructs threaten to overwhelm them, but eventually the lift stops at an exit door, allowing the party to leave the structure via a conveyor belt. It leads us to the Magitech installation, where a spider-like mech known as the Armoured Weapon awaits. Another machine loaded with different weapons, it uses its Magitech cannon offered on the tanking party member, dealing heavy damage. Its main missiles, the launcher, deals a good chunk of damage to all party members, avoiding any mitigating effects that the party might be trying to use. When injured, the machine uses the dynamic sensory jammer, placing a mark on a party member. A countdown begins, and the party member must stop moving when the timer runs out to avoid detection from the jammer, and also avoid the heavy damage that comes with it. After this, the weapon puts out a distress beacon, calling forth a large amount of Magitech slashes, each of which charge at the party. The group must try and focus these smaller foes down to avoid being overwhelmed by their numbers. Lastly, the armoured weapon uses its attached Magitech bits, causing them to fly to the edge of the arena and fire a laser across the floor. After avoiding the bits and dealing with more launchers, the weapon too falls, allowing us to travel on to another nearby lift to begin ascending the wall proper. We find ourselves atop the battlements, and begin the charge forward to reach our mysterious foe. Firstly, a Magitech airship along with a contingent of troops awaits, one of which drops another security key upon defeat. Removing the nearby barrier, we begin following the slope up the wall, and we see a proper view of the fires below, the burning Magitech and strewn bodies. More troops rush down the wall to meet us, and after clearing them the wall levels out once more as we reach the top of the parapet. In the distance we can see the silhouette of a mysterious building, seemingly adorned with a flag, across the border in Giribania. At the last line of defence, we find the troops donning the Grand Company colours as loyalists, and both sets of them put up a good fight against the party. After defeating them, we finally reach the airship landing, where the man we seek stands with his back to us, awaiting the conflict yet to come his way. Wasting no time, he turns to face us, bending to remove his hood and mask, showing himself to be none other than Ilberd Fear, traitor of the Crystal Braze and apparently missing since the feast in Uldar. Labelled the Griffin, he draws his sword and prepares to attack the party. Being a highly experienced fighter, Ilberd holds nothing back as he unleashes his true skills as a gladiator. He begins with Beak of the Griffin, dealing damage to all party members. During the battle, he repeatedly uses Sanguine Blade, leaping to an edge of the arena and preparing a massive swipe across the stage, dealing huge damage to any caught inside the cleave. Additionally, Ilberd uses Claw of the Griffin against the tanking party member, striking them with enormous fury. When injured, Ilberd brings forth Lion's Head, calling forth several magical blades, each of which burst on landing. After they settle, each blade begins channeling a dangerous corrosion effect, exploding and dealing lethal damage to any nearby. The party must attempt to focus upon a single blade to remove the threat from the area. Ilberd does not make it easy, however, using flash powder to blind any looking his way during the sword's channeling. On top of this, he uses Big Boot, dealing a heavy kick to a party member to push them back into one of the exploding blades. Finally, Ilberd plays to his own tactical advantage, although in a somewhat dirty fashion. He occasionally shackles the healer with a restraint collar, incapacitating them and slowly damaging them over time. The party must rush to free the victim from the collar by breaking it, and after doing so, and avoiding more of the Lion's Head blades, Ilberd falls to his knees, apparently defeated and thwarted once more. Out of breath, Ilberd admits his defeat in the battle, but looks below to the wall's interior, and tells us we cannot stop what has started. We catch some of the False Alliance warriors, actually resistance troops in disguise, celebrating the ruckus they created. Atop the wall, Laurentius, along with Yu Hase, set forth an order to the spider mechs hidden within the wall. The mechs descend upon the disguised troops, and after their surprise, the mechs easily tear apart the ranks of troops, launching missiles and stomping on the soldiers. We see a fearful glance from one of the soldiers before they too are assaulted by explosives, and as yet more troops flee the new assailants, another soldier, fading from life, regrets his decision to challenge the Empire, and as his eyes close, we see him call out for help, a prayer to Rauga himself. Back atop the wall, Alphino arrives with the infiltration squad just behind, and Ilberd mockingly calls him Commander. Alphino once more beseeches Ilberd of his choices, even offering to help his soldiers to safety should he call off the attack. Laughing, Ilberd calls Alphino a naive child, moving to his pack to draw out the frozen eyes of Nidhogg. Although Alphino again scolds the Griffin, he mourns his past, reminding the group of the bitter end of Alamigo, how they became conditioned to their defeat, and that even with the rallied cries of those who wanted to fight, all he got in return was their blank stares and light-lost eyes. He rages at Aldar, calling them lazy, all being under Lolorito's coin, and how even though they will easily cry out for Alamigo's liberation, they won't move to spill the blood. He renounces his humanity, claiming if that's what it takes to rescue the homeland none but his fellows deserve, that's what it will take. He recalls to the cries thrown out by his dying men in the battle on the wall, how even as they died, the Empire's fall was their last seething thought. He reveals that his plan is to be able to summon a god, a primal, using their prayers for vengeance instead of their undying faith. Alphino again calls out, stating that he surely must know the limits of the power. Ilberd agrees, but states that to counterbalance this, he will call upon a god more powerful than the Worm of the Calamity itself. He then begins suddenly activating the Eye's power to the shock of the Scions. Ida moves quickly, advancing on Ilberd with her knuckles ready, but he jumps backwards onto a high pillar above the bodies below. Ilberd then shouts to whoever is about to come forth.
My pain, my longing, you shall have it all!
He then raises his arms and falls backwards, descending with a maniacal smile upon his face, landing upon the floor below. We see the pile of corpses upon the wall, and as a sense of foreboding unfolds, we see Ilberd's body and the eyes of Nidhogg begin to glow. A dark energy begins to coalesce and pulse from the nearby bodies, quickly erupting into a huge pillar of light shining high above the wall. A sphere of energy appears to be slowly forming into the primal of vengeance Ilberd willed upon his enemies. The Scions seem unsure as to how to proceed, but Papalymo steps forth and states that there is one way to delay the primal. Moving forward, much to Ida's sudden doubt, Papalymo tells us that he is about to attempt the same sealing spell that Louisoix once used to temporarily stall Bahamut. Alphino cries the impossibility of the spell, needing vast quantities of ether, but Papalymo reminds him that he was ever Louisoix's finest student, pulling the broken Tutsamati from his pack. Ida, however, protests, claiming she knows the costs of such a spell. At that moment, the rest of our allies arrive, Hilda flying the airship, and Yugiri shouts for us to depart at once. Papalymo agrees, but Ida shouts that she's staying if Papalymo is too. he vehemently disagrees, stating that her story must not end here. She refuses to move, and he shouts to Thancred to please take her away. Looking shocked but resolved, Thancred leaps onto the wall, sprinting and picking up Ida against her will. Papalymo tells the Warrior of Light 2 to leave, but they refuse, forcing him to blast us back with a spell onto the ship. The airship begins taking off, and Ida rushes to the edge, staring over at Papalymo on the wall. The Lalafell looks to the ship, bidding farewell to Ida for the second time, and begins channeling the mighty spell. In a familiar fashion, several spears of light begin to form around the light sphere, quickly moving and piercing it. As they lock into place, a solid shell of magic forms around the sphere to seal it in, and as the light intensifies, we see Papalymo smile as he fulfills his final duty. Outside in East Shroud, Ida stands in silence, but bursts out to her allies about why Papalymo wouldn't let her stay. The rest of the Scions too stand in silence, but Thancred speaks up, telling her Papalymo knew what he was doing, and that the look in his eye was the same as Louisoir's before the end. He tells her that nothing more could be done. Ilba caught them all by surprise, with even the Warrior of Light unable to act to stop it. Turning away, he tells Ida to blame him if she needs someone to blame, but to never forget her promise she made to Papalymo. He then tells us to return to the Rising Stones while he waits with the grieving Ida. After this, plans begin to be put into motion to keep an eye on the Sphere of Light now hanging ominously above Baelsar's wall. The Scions are in observation along with members of the Alliance, who soon call another emergency meeting in Gridania. Before attending, we catch a scene of a large mysterious man arriving in Vesper Bay, shouting loud and proud until he collapses from exhaustion. At the meeting, the Wood Whalers explain the unchanged condition of the Sphere of Light above the wall, and after Ishtola's examinations, she has determined the definite presence of a primal within. We find out that the Garleans already responded by sending an airship, which was immediately destroyed by a burst of energy from the sphere. As the group discuss a way to approach and destroy the primal, a shout from the entrance attracts everyone's attention. Being blocked by the Serpent Guards, we see Nero Tol Skaver of all people claiming to have an easy solution to our problem. He proposes that as the primal within contains power near equal to that of Bahamut, the best way to stop the beast would be to unleash Omega upon it, the mighty automaton used by Alag to trap Bahamut within Dalamud. Nero seems confident as to be able to reactivate Omega, and offers us his expertise in doing so. Although Sid doubts his authenticity, Nero points out that other than merely sending the Warrior of Light at the problem again, no other solution will come forth in a timely manner. Kane Senna questions the matter of what becomes of Omega after its job is done, and Nero confidently believes the machine is but a tool to be controlled. After some more back and forth with Nero, Sid proposes to the Alliance group to leave the job of restoring Omega to them, to which the group agrees. The Warrior of Light, as well as Yugiri, agree to attend as security detail to Cartano to both defend the technicians as well as keep an eye on Nero. Before heading to Cartano, we visit the Rising Stones to inform our remaining comrades of the new developments. After Ida and Alphino return from the Shroud, the large man we saw earlier shouts in a booming voice, looking for the domicile of the Scions. He spots Yugiri and runs at her, who in return is shocked to see an old friend, Gosetsu, visiting from the Far East. After explaining that Urionje and he discussed each other's plights, he requests Yugiri return home at once by order of their master. Yugiri, however, believes that obligations bind her to Eorzea for now, and she must see them through as to repay the hospitality once shown by the Scions. After Nero complains about the delay and the potential of leaving Omega to the Empire, Gosetsu changes his tone and offers his own blade to fight the Imperials at our side. Ida too agrees to come with us, and the Scions divide to approach their new goals once more. We take flight to Cartano, where Nero begins to activate the device atop one of the pillars there. As he does so, a platoon of Imperials arrives to take over the area, with Grimwart at their lead. Nero and Sid use the transporter to escape from the conflict, while the security group, Gosetsu included, turn to face the Imperial squad. After an initial skirmish, we realise that Grimwart brought an insane amount of soldiers to the flats, as their number keeps being replaced wherever one falls. Nero contacts us via Linkpearl, questioning how we still fight the soldiers, and sends his red Magitech arm before us. Better equipped, we use the armour to take out groups of soldiers at once, and after tearing through reinforcements, the soldiers realise the cause is lost and begin fleeing back to their ship. Grimwart, meanwhile, stays and engages with the group once more, but is no match for the combined might of our allies. He yells in frustration and flees, ensuring the safety of the group from the attack. Afterwards, the group arrives within Omega's activation room, and we see Nero marvelling at the response from the machine. Worryingly, neither of the technicians found a way to fully control the automaton, and so they put measures into place to try and disable it after it tackles the primal. Ida, however, steps forth and questions if what they're doing is the right thing. The Warrior of Light questions Ida's opinion on the matter, and she ponders for a moment before deciding that awakening Omega is correct. She approaches the button on the panel, remembering Papalymo and not wanting to waste a chance, and slams her fist on the button. Omega begins to awaken, much to Nero's enjoyment and Sid's less joyful reaction. We then return to a scene upon the wall, where an intense battle breaks out. We see the sphere of light begin to glow and crack, and from it bursts a mighty worm, wings spreading from the open seal. Omega meanwhile waits on the wall, beginning its assault with a myriad missiles. The worm, Shinryu, roars and retaliates, summoning forth an enormous tidal wave of water at Omega. Afterwards, both take to the sky, each launching their own attack while evading the other in a mounting conflict. Eventually, both charge up an enormous burst of energy and launch it at the other in the form of a beam. In the resulting explosion, we see a pillar of light not unlike the Ultima spell once cast by the weapon itself, and it causes both forces to shoot off into the distance, towards Garabania. Both were worn out from the battle. Back in the control room, Nero tells us the signals from Omega have stopped transmitting, but to find out more, we will need to venture into the field. For the moment, Sid places the machine into a sleep mode, and suggests we make our way back to Gridania. Over with Ida meanwhile, the Warrior of Light notices her Archon marks glow and fade away, and she comments that with the last of Papalymo's ether vanishing, the spell he cast on her too is beginning to break. This leaves us wondering about who Ida really is, considering she is well known among the Scions as one of the Archons, and one within the Circle of Knowing at that. For now, however, all we can do is return to discuss our next move, as the tension around the wall begins to grow. And that's the end of the story and lore of Baelsar's Wall, a mighty monolith made to remind the Alamegans of their invaders, and to repel any would-be rebellions from across the border to the Shroud. Although the wall still stands as ever, the events that unfolded within caused the loss of another Scion, as well as the birth of an almighty primal, and the freeing of a machine said to be capable of capturing them single-handedly. Much more mystery remains surrounding Ida, and we are left to wonder what her true intentions might really be, as the Imperial threat looms ever closer to home. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more Final Fantasy XIV lore, and I'll see you next time for the hard mode version of Som Al.